Okay. We should, if someone can confirm we've gone live.
I should get a notification.
Okay. Let's see.
Yep. Yes, we're live.
Yeah. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Want to welcome you to yet another installation of Chat with the Frat by the Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Omicron Phi Lambda chapter here, also known as the South Fulton Alphas. We're very excited about what we have planned to discuss on today. And equally as important is that we are excited with regard to the guest speakers that we have on tap on today. For all of you to know that Alpha Phi Alpha and Omicron Phi Lambda chapter, this initiative is what we refer to as an interdisciplinary initiative. When COVID-19 began to take hold, one of the things that we recognized that there was an incredible need for us to respond to the need of the community and respond to the need of Black men as well as Black families. And as a result of that, within the chapter of the interdisciplinary team was formed, consisting of medical doctors, Dr. Leroy Graham and Terry Dickerson, clinical psychologist, Dr. Christopher Bass, public health expert and doctoral candidate, and public administrator of the year nominee, Marcus Dumas, a doctoral candidate as well as expert in emergency management and risk communication, Kyle Bryant. We also have associate professor and social worker, Dr. Wright. And of course, my name is Dr. Gary O. White, a social work educator. We are excited about what is transpiring on today. This started with what is known as Chat with the Frat, where we recognize the need to respond to the challenges of the community, as I shared. And so as a result, this endeavor had taken place. But what's powerful about Chat with the Frat is that we also recognize the need to respond to the ever-changing needs of the community. And so with COVID-19 impacting society, it became a common euphemism that said that COVID-19 has changed every corner, facet of society, from graduations to shutting down of the government to shelter-in-place movements. And it was argued that no stone was left unturned. But we argue that yet there are some stones that was left unturned. And that stone, what we recognize, we refer to as the epidemic within the pandemic. And the epidemic within the pandemic dealt with the senseless killing, the ongoing senseless killing of African-American males and African-Americans in the community at large by vigilantes as well as unjust police officers. And so we recognize that in this work that we needed to make an adjustment so we could in fact respond to this need. And so I'm so excited that we have some powerful guest speakers here today to aid us in engaging in this very important dialogue. So I'm excited to bring to this chapter and to bring to this Chat with the Frat some of the heavy hitters in this movement. We began with Brother Derek Bozeman, who is host of Too Much Truth with Derek Bozeman on 1380 WALK. He is also president and CEO of Facilitation Strategies. And I got to take a quick shout out for those of you, your organizations and groups that need to engage and understand the importance and the art and science of facilitation. You need to log on and find Facilitation Strategies. Brother Bozeman is also the co-founding member of Let Us Make Man, a gathering to reclaim Black manhood. We also have with us as attorney extraordinaire, Brother Francis Johnson, who's a pastor and an educator. In 2006, he was appointed the Southern Region Director of the NAACP and later on the Executive Director of the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP. And so we happy to have this activist leader on board. And of course, one of our leaders that makes all of this possible within the context of the fraternity, and more importantly, within the context of the Georgia district, this discussion on the impact in the lives of African-American males would not be held if we did not bring on board for this discussion the 14th Georgia District Director of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Brother Sherman Lofton Jr. And finally, on this panel and engaged in this discussion is Brother Doug Evans III. He is an Atlanta historian and the Grand Director of Masonic Education for Prince Hall and co-founder of the Atlanta Police Historical Society, as well as a co-founding member of Let Us Make Man. And so we are excited to bring to this discussion on today these brothers for this dialogue. So we're going to just jump right on. We're going to jump right on into this discussion and this dialogue by turning first and foremost to Brother Derek Bozeman. And Bose, I want to just kind of get right to the point and say yesterday in Brunswick, Georgia was a history-making event. Brother Bozeman, tell me what yesterday was about and why was it so critical that we have this journey from Atlanta down to Brunswick, Georgia?
Well, let me just say this. My voice is a little bit fatigued from screaming, but we all by now know Ahmaud Asbury's name. And one of the things that is so critical, our sojourn here in these yet to be United States of America, which time at one time it was stated that by the Supreme Court that a Black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. We're trying to, while it may be reversed on the court paperwork, that's how many folks operate. So yesterday, a caravan from Atlanta to Brunswick, 4.5-hour drive, over 100 and some cars that follow behind each other to get there, with hundreds more joining us once we got there. As I said yesterday during the rally, Ahmaud cannot speak for himself. And so it is the responsibility of us who are still seeking freedom and justice to speak for this young man. We all have seen the manner of his death. We were shocked by it, that two white guys can hunt a young man down, 25 years old, jogging through a neighborhood, and just shoot him in the way that they did. And so yesterday was about giving that young brother a voice, to say also to his family that we love y'all. We stand in unity and solidarity. We want you to know if we got to drive 4.5 hours to get there, we had to drive 15 hours. It was important that they know that their son was just not a local issue, and that this issue is now bigger than Ahmaud. But while he's a central focus of it, the real issue is white supremacy and racism. And the psychologist Neely Fuller said, if you do not understand white supremacy and racism, anything else you seek to understand will simply confuse you. So we ask ourselves, why would they gun down this young man, even if he's supposed to went into a house? You know, he didn't have anything on him. What makes individuals do that? And what makes the justice system? The real issue was a call for the firing and the forced resignation, if they won't do the honorable thing and quit themselves, of the DA down there. She covered this up. This guy worked for her. The father did. Gregory McMichael worked in her office for retired. He was not even certified while he worked in her office. She covered him in many different ways. He did not get even trained to do use of force and some of the things that were critical, even in this young man's case, had no arrest powers, but she allowed him to continue to work without post-certification. And so then when she gets an opportunity, because it's a small area, she's actually the DA, the chief prosecutor in 5 different counties in that area. She bounces it over to DA Barnhill, George Barnhill. Barnhill, again, realized he has a conflict, but instead of just saying, I have a conflict, I cannot prosecute this case because of some relationship issues, I believe, with his son and that DA, he issues a, what is nothing short of prosecutory misconduct. He issues a statement before he recuses himself. A recusal requires you to just say, look, this is my inherent conflict. Therefore, I cannot handle this case. Not only he recused himself, but then he issued a statement saying, if he were to look at this case, he
Hmm.
would have found them innocent as well. Tate comes out, and so now we're here with the brothers of Omicron Phi Lambda, and having this serious conversation about what is our responsibility as Black men and as a fraternity in our response to help give Ahmaud a voice again.
Thank you very much, DB. And it's crazy, and I can't wait to certainly double back with you. As I shared with you, DB, when I was driving home, what kept ringing in my ear, you kept saying 72 days.
Yeah.
72 days. And I woke up and I've been saying 72 days all day. So please keep in mind, I'm going to double back with you on that concept in a moment. But Brother Francis Johnson, Brother Johnson, you are a civil rights attorney and an activist as well. And I just heard what Bo said in terms of DA Barnhill recusing himself, but not before saying how he would handle the case. So, Brother Johnson, from a legal standpoint, what's wrong with all of this, how they've handled this? And you're down in that area. So what's wrong with all of this?
Well, I appreciate being a part of this conversation. Of course, anytime that I can be with the brothers in the House of Alpha, that's a good thing. And, you know, we are here primarily because ultimately we're pursuing justice. That is the oath that the district attorney takes. That is the oath that members of the bar take as well. That is the oath that the sheriff and law enforcement officers take when they take on arrest powers. And in a real sense, that is the responsibility of every citizen to pursue justice. Because as Brother King shared with us in his life and with his sacrifice for this cause, justice denied to any of us is justice really denied to all of us. So that is what this is about, nothing less than rather justice will continue to ring hollow or whether it will have meaning in 2020. And so we were with Brother Bozeman yesterday in Brunswick. We're going to stay on the wall and continue to focus the issues on what they need to be on, and that is the duty of those we pay from the public treasury to pursue justice who did not do that. Literally, the oath of office of the district attorney is to do justice without fear or favoritism. And in this case, we see Jackie Johnson, before her recusal, put her hands on the scale of justice as a favor to Greg and Travis McMichael. We see that she called in Barnhill the day of the incident. He was involved immediately before she even recused herself. And of course, this is just not the misdoings of the local prosecutor. The Attorney General, Chris Carr, should have explored the conflict when Jackie Johnson presented it to him. And he would have immediately came to the conclusion that George Barnhill is not appropriate because he's been tainted. She brought him into the case. And of course, Derek Bozeman has already elucidated how George Barnhill engaged in prosecutorial misconduct. But again, the AG, Chris Carr, when Barnhill recused himself, didn't explore the real nature of that recusal and pass it on to a third DA, only to appoint a fourth DA in the Cobb prosecutor Holmes. And we know this narrative. To find someone who is a person of color, to put a black face on the same old problem of a justice system that is never meant to serve justice to us, and whether that comes from a person in blackface or not. So we've got to center the issue on what it needs to be, focus on what we need to focus on, and continue to press until we see a change. And that's what we're doing. I'm still on the ground in Brunswick. We're still helping to organize because this has got to be organic. People have said, well, where is Al Sharpton? Where is such and such? Where is such and such? And my statement is, you know, those who bring attention to this, that's good. but we need the kind of organic leadership that bubbles up from the ground with people who are planted and rooted in this soil. That's why I'm here in Brunswick. That's why we're going to stay the course to make sure that Brunswick can respond to this challenge.
Thank you very much. Absolutely powerful. Bowles, I want to kind of double back with you right quick. But before I do that, Brother Johnson, I think Rashad Ali.
Listen, Brother White,
Yeah.
I'm with another great civil rights attorney in Brother Maoli Davis.
You know, I was going to drop that. That's where I was going. You know, Miley's one of the co-founding members of Let Us Make Man. So I guarantee you, I'm gonna double back.
Somebody's trying to sneak into our frat
Right,
tonight.
right.
And so this
What's going on? I always y'all know I got nothing but love for the Alphas, man. How you brothers doing, man? I'm gone. I just wanted to speak and say hello to my brothers. I love you, brother.
Oh man, that's good. And y'all are on the phone, on the phone, so that you all know that on the phone right there was a civil rights and liberation lawyer, attorney Miley Davis of the Davis Bozeman Law Firm. He's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, but he's also one of the founding members of Let Us Make Man. And Bose, I was literally getting ready to go to you before Brother Johnson threw that alley-oop. But certainly I was going to go to you to say, tell me about the organizers, which was going to give me to Miley. We cannot bypass any of this discussion without talking about Miley. So tell me about the leaders and the coordinators of this, DB.
Well, I mean, look, you got two of the baddest attorneys, and I tell both of them they're really not attorneys. Your first avocation, your first love is what you do most and best. They're really organizers who happen to pick up the profession of law. But Francis Johnson, who has organized throughout the state at the NAACP, left that post but didn't stop organizing. And of course, Attorney Mel Davis, who is just a natural teacher, happened to choose the wrong organization, but we don't fault him. My biological brother is a Kappa, and we pray for him too. But they have pulled together. I'm getting like the Mufasa of the group. I'm getting a little too old and too intemperate to deal with just young folk. And so they have pulled together a group of young people across social lines, across fraternal lines, across economic strata, and the Gen X and millennials, because they're natural teachers, and have Just Georgia, which is a mighty coalition of groups. One thing they always keep in front of us is the need for gender balance. And so there are women who don't play a second fiddle or sit in the back, but who are out front and leading, and to bring the voices of these young people who want to naturally sometimes disconnect from us old heads, as they say, to make sure that they have a voice, in a big voice, in a weighted voice at the table. So you got everybody from ACLU to, you name it, they are part of this coalition and growing. And the other thing is to keep the door open for other organizations to come on, because Francis made it clear, we should be down there disturbing the order with the local people every day. One of the most powerful things, Gary, because you were there, when that aunt said, I have not got any rest since this happened. The hell, if she can't rest, why his folks at home sleeping? Why is the guy who did the videotaping sleeping? Why is the prosecutor sleeping? It is the responsibility of those of us who love freedom to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. Okay, and so if we're not doing that, if we're not making people nervous about what they have done to our people, then we need to examine ourselves. This is not time for niceties, or this really is the time to say no more. No more. Our brothers and sisters in the Jewish community say never again. We've got to make these things more than just a slogan. No justice, no peace is a good rhyme. But when do we put some meat on that and make sure that they understand ain't gonna be no peace? Won't be any commerce here. Won't be any supporting people who don't support us until we get real justice. And not only in Brunswick, but in Atlanta, wherever we find ourselves.
Powerful. Thank you very much, GB. And we're certainly going to circulate our way back around that. The list of groups that were involved in this movement, Bose, you were spot on. I mean, it began to grow exponentially when I'm able to literally lay my eyes on this. The Georgia NAACP, the New Georgia Project, Let Us Make Man, the Black Man Lab, the Southern Center for Human Rights, Save Ourselves, ACLU, Black Voters Matters. I mean, this thing really began to grow, and there's something powerful when organizations are bold enough and cold enough to step forward to take a stand against an epidemic, because we're talking about an epidemic within a pandemic, to begin to step forward and say, as an organization, this is our position and this is the stance that we're going to take. And, I'm excited when I look at Chat with the Frat, and in that our district director and our chapter leaders saw fit to allow this to happen. So Brother Sherman, to our great district director, the leader for our district, Brother Sherman, let me ask you, and as an organization, Alpha Phi Alpha, what is our role? What is our position in terms of what we are seeing, witnessing, and experiencing, and our call to action as well?
Thank you, Brother White. And first and foremost, greetings to all my brothers that wear the colors of old gold and black. And of course, that we are sons of Callus. I would say this, the last 20 years, I think a majority of the membership of this fraternity have gotten it confused. In the sense that they have taken this fraternity and tried to turn it into a social study club or a social society. In this sense, we have to get back to what we are supposed to be doing as alpha men. And when I said this during the campaign, I was saying we got to get back into the streets, because the communities that we serve need to understand who we are again. We need to reintroduce ourselves to these communities. Alpha Phi Alpha has always been an organization that was synonymous with civil rights, fighting for justice, always collaborated with other organizations such as the NAACP and the National Urban League and so forth. So it's no surprise that the men of Alpha should be out front in helping to, one, bring attention and help shine a light on, we're calling it an injustice, but I just call it what it is. It was murder. I think I was talking to someone earlier today, I called it a 2020 version of lynching. Because as I saw Doug Evans posting on Facebook earlier today, different lynching photos, that's what you saw. That those people prefer to capture and photograph and document the murder of Black people. And this is just a 2020 version of it. Ahmaud wasn't hanging from a tree, but the fact that he was chased and hunted down like an animal in the street, just like they did for our forefathers. But circling back, Alpha's mission, of course, we say, first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all. We are servant leaders. Part of the mission of us as Alpha men is that we're supposed to be bringing attention. We should be shouting from the rooftops and the mountaintops and the hilltops. We're not comfortable with that. Honestly, when I heard about the videotape, I did not want to see it. I would say these last, I think Brother Bozeman said that, he's a Mufasa of this thing, because he's been doing this thing 30 plus years. But I'll say this, that I've gotten tired, man. I'm tired of seeing our young people being murdered in the street. And then because society's become desensitized to it. But I ended up seeing the video, and like many of you, my range of emotions, it was like a roller coaster. Anger, I was angry, sad, just defeat. I couldn't sleep that night. But I was like, and that's when I knew, I said, you know what? And I woke up, I said, you know what, brother, you're the district director of Georgia for Alpha. you can do something. So this is what we're trying to do. Brother Bozeman has already started his process. And of course, we sent a letter out to the district earlier in the week. And we said there are a few things that we want. And some things we're going to do behind the scenes, and some things we're going to do out front. But essentially some of the same points that were already made. We are demanding that Jackie Johnson and Barnhill, that both of them either resign or they be removed from position. We are demanding there be a hate crime bill here in the state of Georgia. We're also demanding that the citizens arrest, or whatever version of stand your ground exists in the Georgia law books, need to be removed. In addition to that, we also are establishing a task force. Currently, I'm still trying to firm up one more name. I'm glad to say Brother Bozeman is one of the members of this task force, and we have some brothers across the district that are going to help strategize, help us put together comprehensive plans and recommendations for how the district should move, and perhaps not only from a response, but also how do we move forward beyond this? Because today it's Ahmaud Arbery, tomorrow it will be someone else. And so we need to make sure we have an infrastructure in place that we can respond accordingly. And so that when they see men in suits and black and gold coming, they already know the alphas are coming. And so that's what we want to get back to, and then let people know that when the alphas are there, it's going to be a problem.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you, DB, on several levels there. I appreciate you for certainly highlighting and bringing that point forward. I'm very sure, one of the things about being on Boza's coattail for these almost 10 years in Let Us Make Man is that I had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable around him. Because one thing that's absolutely clear is that to be a leader and to take a lead, those who appear or give the appearance to be leaders, when the temperature gets heated, they disappear. Brother King said the greatest measure of a man is not where he stands during times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands during times of challenge and controversy. And that remains one of my favorite quotes, because this is a time of challenge and controversy. So when I'm hearing organizations say stand down, or let's hold up on the fence and see how this turns out, well, that's why I call that a manhood moment. The manhood moment is how you stand, where you stand, and when you stand. But this whole phenomenon, nothing about what we're witnessing in terms of the killing of Black youth within the African American community by these systems is not new. And that's why we thought it only appropriate to bring in a historian, and Brother Doug Evans, Atlanta historian, a Georgia historian, a historian even for Prince Hall Mason, as well as the contributions that he's made to historical documentations for organizations. So Brother Evans, bring us up to speed. Help put all of this in context, because this is not a new phenomenon. This is not something that's on the rise. We're saying this is an ongoing piece. So put this in context, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. White, for the opportunity. Of all our studies, I've often heard it said by Bose and many others, history is best to reward our research. For me, I had become the grand historian of the Masons around 2003. My wife's people are from Columbus, Georgia. Come to find out that her cousin, first cousin, was murdered. And so we drove down, like we rode for Ahmaud, we rode for Kenneth Walker. In 2003, it was 3 of his homeboys riding in a car, stopped by Muskogee County Sheriff's Department. And like our district director said, slain in the street like an animal. And I remember the call from radio show hosts, much like Derek Bozeman at that time. They were calling for us to go down to Columbus. And so how things change, though they still stay the same. I can see in our history, 2 months before 7 men came together in Ithaca, New York 2 months before 1906, one of the greatest organizations would ever be founded. 2 months before that, September, in Atlanta, the riots in Atlanta, Georgia, right downtown, right on Auburn Avenue, right in 4th Ward. Why did they stop black men as they were walking downtown? Because they thought they were uppity. Because there was an election going on and both candidates were trying to see who could hate black people the most. And it created this fervor in the community. And so black men were slain and what we now would call the Atlanta riots. What's interesting about those riots, it led to another taking of weapons from black people in a town called Brownsville in Atlanta. And guess what, Dr. Wright and Dr. White? 250 black men and women were arrested in Brownsville, Dr. Bass, and many of them were Atlanta University professors. And so this happens over and over again. And for you three who are tied into this great college in the AU Center, let me remind you that it was in 1906 that president of Atlanta University said, "We tried to make good men and women of our colored population at our very doorstep. The whites killed them. These good men were lawless element of our population, and that element has now been condemned. And as these people were now killed, they fought for their lives." This was the president of Atlanta University, Clark Atlanta at that time, Clark University, saying, "We tried to be good black folks, and they still murdered us in the streets in 1906. So as Bose often says, DB often talks about, you really got to be able to, as alpha men, walk in the streets as well as in the suites. And so I think sometimes we forget about Riri and Run Run and Pookie on the corner. And we can look at the history of lynching in Georgia, as we know it was the leading state for lynching next to Mississippi. As we look at the incarceration rates for Georgia, we can go down and we can run the list. Well, Georgia was even started as a penal institution at the Grand Lodge for the Masons in 1733. And so by the time the 1800s and the 19th century rolled around, there were only 40 people incarcerated. But what happened as we got through the Civil War? And as we approached the end of the Civil War, and we started seeing going from 40 people incarcerated to 1817 to 1865, only 20% were people of color. But by the time 1864 rolled around, you saw 147 black people incarcerated. Now, by the time the Civil War ended, that 147 black people by 1910 became 500. And so what did we see? We needed free labor. Mm-hmm. And so that 500 in 1910, by 1920, that 500 became 1,000. And guess what, Dr. White? The mean demographic age for those young black men incarcerated were from 18 to 22.
Still the same.
Still the same. And that's the age group that you all would normally be educating as professors. And so we ask ourselves, what do we have to do to stop being murdered in the streets or incarcerated from 18 to 22? And I hope to hear that answer.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you very much. Bose, here's something that can, again, I'm going to go back to that 72 because it rang in my mind. I told you I'm writing a poem just called 72 because it hits so hard. The video.
Yeah.
The video, why was it so important for the Barnhills and everyone? Why was it so important to keep this killing hidden? And why was that video came out? What was the delay? And more importantly, this is the one, more importantly, why was it so critical for them to turn around and show a picture of him standing at a construction site? So what's going on in there, and why were those pieces so critical in this process?
Let me say this, the district deputy just said something, district director, wearing both hats tonight, that just stuck in my spirit. And Doug started putting the lynching pictures up, and it clicked. That when you see how our people were lynched now, those pictures don't go back to 1906, the Atlanta race riots here. They don't go back to 1920. Some of those pictures go back to 1950. And when you look at the pictures, who do you see standing around? In most of the pictures, you see the children of the lynchers, right? And so now these are full-grown men and women who have now entered into, various fields of endeavor, and judges and lawyers and police force and all of that. That is the history. But what we found out last night, after coming home, being exhausted, I just started reading, and they finally admitted, I think, on Channel 2, talking to one of the lawyers for the family, they got admission that it was actually the father, Greg McMichael, who sent the video. He confirmed that he sent the video because he felt that, look, my folks done gave me a break. So in these little small town, look, I'm off the hook. I've had the DA said she's not going to prosecute it. I had a second DA say he wouldn't prosecute it. I have a third DA that is saying he gonna bounce it. And so I'm really off the hook. And so white supremacy goes along with white arrogance. And so what did he do? Because now there's a buzz saying, well, you told the parents, because remember, the investigator for the police department called the mother and said, your son was involved in robbing a house. And he got killed by the homeowner. And in small town Georgia, who don't want to believe the authorities? So she's like, man, Ahmad, I know my baby now. I don't, while I don't believe it, but I don't think the police department will come tell me this. And so it started leaking out that maybe it did not go down like that. And so what McMichael, the father, does is said, in order to prove that it went down like that, I'm going to give the tape to a radio station down here. So he goes and drops a copy of the tape off. It's almost like if you I do radio, you brought some information like that, I may have to run it up the flagpole because it's so controversial, but eventually it gets out. But we found the source of how it actually got into the public. It came from the daddy, because in his mind, that was just another lynching picture. This is what you do to uppity Negroes, and Negroes who won't stop long enough for me to question them, because that was the thing. We just wanted to question them. That's what he said at first. But the problem in every crime where your arrogance take over is that you call 911. And so they're asking you questions of fact. What are you seeing? What are you doing? Where are you standing? And so when we read the transcript of the 911 tape, it does not add up. The 911 operator, what did he do? Did you witness any criminal activity? And he started talking about somebody empty house. But she said, well, what is the crime? And so when you overlay the 911 tape against the video that was shot by the guy, Roddy, the guy who shot the videotape, was not the one who actually released the videotape. So he calls, the daddy talks to a lawyer. The lawyer told him very clearly, now this is what the lawyer said last night, that he was not giving him legal advice, but he thought that he had in fact murdered this kid, that it was not justified. The daddy said, in order to get myself off the hook, I'm gonna release the tape. That's how the tape got out. But I think it really is those who go into Africa and Zimbabwe and to go into Congo and shoot big rhino, the first thing they want to do, you shooting a rhino that's 10 feet from you, right? As soon as he hit the ground, you want to run over and do what? Take a picture. So anytime a hunter kills big game, he wants to go and take a picture. This guy had blood. He literally had Ahmad's blood on his hands, on his shirt. Now you tell me where in America, anywhere, two black men could shoot down a 25-year-old white boy with his blood on your hand and on your shirt, and you get to go home and eat a hamburger. It just will not happen that way. And so that's why, as a parent, as a father, as a brother, as a fraternity, if we will sit down on this, I don't know what the hell we're doing, to be honest with you, just flat out honest with you. There's no greater injustice that I've witnessed than what happened to this young man. And that requires a response, because he cannot respond for himself.
Well, powerful. Thank you very much, DB. It's amazing because, there's a reality, and I've always argued that he who controls the narrative will dictate the way the rest of the world sees it. It's an argument that I made in 1992 as a protester in the Rodney King riots. And every year, DB, I ask my graduate students around controlling the narrative, I ask, who remembers the Rodney King riot? And everybody raises their hand. And then I say, who remembers the Rodney King rebellion? And people say, I don't know nothing about a rebellion. And I say, but that's what it was. We were rebelling against an unjust system, but it got labeled as a riot. And so I spent since 92 to this day, I've spent trying to get folks to understand that this is a rebellion. So what we are engaged in now is yet a rebellion. Attorney Brother Johnson, I got a question. So they now decide to pick a DA from Cobb County, but it's a Black woman. So now I'm curious to understand what's the rationale, what's the relationship between Brunswick and Cobb, because there's a whole lot of cities between Brunswick and Cobb. So what's the relationship between Brunswick and Cobb, and then in terms of who they chose in that regard, what's the significance? What ought we pay attention to in this selection process?
Yes, so very good question. Just taking a step back, you should know that in terms of defining the narrative, there's always been a resistance, and that is a part of the narrative that we don't hear. I'm in Brunswick, and as I look out at the ocean, I'm looking at the largest cemetery, graveyard that exists on this planet. And make no mistake about it, that resistance narrative begins from the first people captured on the Gold Coast of Africa and brought to these golden isles of Georgia. It exists in 1909 with the founding of Alpha, which is literally a resistance to white supremacy that they experienced on campus, and an effort to aid themselves. It continues through the founding of the NAACP. It continues through Let Us Make Man. These are all resistance efforts to do what we can. And so you asked a specific question about Brunswick. Brunswick's demographics in terms of its makeup is very similar to Cobb County. And those are important criteria if you talk about a change of venue and selecting of jury of so-called peers for the person. And we anticipate there may be a change of venue in this case. And so Cobb County has played host to trials that had an incident that took place in Glenn County. And likewise, Glenn County has hosted trials for incidents that took place in Cobb County. This DA was an assistant to former Cobb County District Attorney Vic Reynolds. Vic Reynolds is now the GBI director appointed to that position by Governor Kemp. Governor Kemp also appointed DA Holmes to her position. And so what you see is an effort because of the just egregious nature of what has happened and the cover-up, which reaches to the highest levels. It starts in Brunswick, but it reaches to the highest levels of state government. And Governor Kemp knows that he is vulnerable on this issue. This is the same governor that put a TV ad holding a shotgun at a young man. This is the same governor who said that he's got a pickup truck. He'll go around and round up people. Governor Kemp knows that he's on this. And so Vic Reynolds, the GBI director, has appointed his former assistant, DA Holmes, because he needs this to be a locked up job. He doesn't need any more issues to come out of this. The AG Chris Carr, who's never set foot in the courtroom, has now called in the Federal Department of Justice for an investigation. That's an attempt to throw a wet blanket over all this, to simply say we can't discuss this. It's a federal investigation. It's out of our hands. But make no mistake about it, we who understand what needs to take place here will make sure that this is done. And the citizens of Brunswick should do the same. And so we give DA Holmes no pass because her skin happens to look like ours. Everybody who's our skin folk is not our kin folk and doesn't necessarily carry our values. If she comes down and does the right thing, she'll get our full approbation. If she comes down and tries to cut corners, tries to minimize the responsibility in this case that goes up the food chain, if she tries to cover for Kemp or Carr or for Vic Reynolds, if she does any of that, we'll expose her for the fraud that she is if she does that. But I expect her to do her job, and she has a tough one in front of. Make no mistake about it. I've been practicing criminal defense for a long time, and this is not a slam dunk case. We've seen this before, and the narrative is fixed. I want you to come back. I want to talk to you a little bit about that narrative and how it plays out. You know, the narrative was in Trayvon Martin, there wasn't witnesses, so you don't know what happened. So you just ought to be quiet. Then there were 12 witnesses or more in Mike Brown's case, and they said, well, you can't believe witnesses. You need video. Well, then there was video shot, not in a little town like Brunswick, but in New York City with Eric Gardner. They said, well, even though it's on video, he had engaged in some crime. Well, what crime had Tamir Rice committed when he was 12 years old playing in a park? But they said, well, what you ought to do is go to college and get a career, and your respectability, your affiliation with Alpha, the fact that you belong to the Peachtree Club or whatever club, those things were guaranteed. Well, Sandra Bland had a master's degree and it was starting her job when she was cut down. Served the country. Anthony Hill was a veteran, cut down in DeKalb County. Walking, sleeping, living. The threat is, and this has to be the narrative, the threat is your skin. And so until we recognize that, like my brother Bozeman says, nothing else will make sense in this case.
So thank you very much. So it takes me back again, because there's a common theme that I always hear, and that's this notion of I feared for my life. And then that's a concept that suddenly becomes believable, that I feared for my life. And then we look, and if he's dark, if he's heavy, if he's got dreads, if he's got locks, somehow it becomes believable. Brother Sherman, Alpha Phi Alpha is the oldest intercollegiate Greek letter organization made up predominantly of African-American men. Are we the dangerous class? And what must we do in our role as leaders around our own, protecting our own brand?
That's a good question, Brother Dr. White. Are we the dangerous class? I would say we're probably more dangerous to ourselves more than anyone else, because we tend to, within our own community, we tend to try to shame those who have a level of intellect or smarts, and they try to apply it academically versus to street science. But I will say this is that the old trickeration of white supremacy. White supremacy will have you questioning yourself and questioning everything else around you. With this fraternity, one of the things that attracted me to it was because of his track record with calling to attention things that were wrong. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up and reading history books about civil rights and those, my parents being in the AUC during the time of civil rights in the 60s, I always ask myself, what would I have done, during that time? What would my response have been? Would I have been with the students in the AUC protesting, or would I have been just kind of like, man, y'all making too much trouble. Y'all need to settle down. And I hope that I would have been part of the group in the former, because that's the one that actually worked to get things done. I want to kind of go off a tangent because I found out about 3 months ago that those of us, the Loftons that are here in Metro Atlanta, it was a very small, really, it was just my father, my grandmother, and my great aunt. We didn't know any other Loftons. But it was brought to my attention about 3 months ago that there was an Isaiah Lofton in Hogansville, Georgia, who was appointed postmaster by President McKinley. And of course, you all know a postmaster has a lot of powers, especially, and he's a federal appointee. And during that time, of course, in Hogansville, Georgia, which is not too far from LaGrange or Columbus, he was threatened a lot. And even in one case, he had a brother who actually came to visit him. And in a way to try to intimidate him and scare him, when his brother left to go back home, a group of McMichaels, hunted him down and they killed him. So this is that practice, because white supremacy doesn't like for what we do, for what you do. So their answer is to murder you, to make you quiet, kill you, maim you, or have, like in some of the photos I saw that Doug posted, there were even some Black people in some of the photos in the crowd at a public lynching. And then we know that that was also to instill fear, to let them know that that could be you next time. But what is the role of Alpha in this? I think first and foremost, we're Black men. First and foremost. And all of us are affected by it, because white supremacy doesn't care if we're educated or not. They see us the same way. They don't see that, Dr. White, Dr. Bass, and Dr. Wright have PhDs and that you all a degree. They don't see it that way, but they see your skin first, and that's all they see. And it doesn't matter if someone has my complexion, or they have Brother Curtis Bond's complexion. We're all the same, but the fact of the matter is that as alphas, we understand that. We knew that this fraternity was birthed out of the Niagara movement. It was also birthed out of some of the philosophies of Du Bois, and what have you, and that this was an organization founded because it needed to take action. So we have to be a fraternity of action. And look, we have plenty of brothers that can, elucidate and pontificate and speak and use all kind of polysyllabic words and make it sound good and rhyme and put on different types of meter and whatnot. But we have to put some substance and meat behind it. So what we find too is that while we can be in the streets calling attention, there's also things that we have to do. The fight also has to be under the gold dome. We have to fight legally. We have to get some laws changed. We have to get some policy change, because it's not going to change a perception that a white supremacist has. Most white people that are racist don't think that they're racist. They don't think they're racist, but the actions speak, the actions show that they are racist. But what we have to do, brothers, is that we have to, this is why the task force is going to be important, because they're going to help develop the strategies and the methods of how we move forward, right? So we're going to look at, the task force is going to look at certain things about, how do we, the social aspect of the social action, and things of that. So we're also got to look at what are some of the legal things that we can do? How can, we need to work and partner with, some of our state lawmakers and state senators to try to get certain things changed. We have to force the governor's hand to sign certain things into law. Okay. And right now, while the iron is hot, is what we have to do. So, it's just not a single frontal attack. It's got to be attacks on multiple fronts that have to be done if we're to be successful at this. And we can't rest. This is something that will always be continuous. And that's the part that we have to understand. The fight will never stop. It's going to continue. We have to continue the fight. We may get a win here and there, but that's all it is that's a battle, check that battle, put that one to the side, go on to the next one. And that's the mindset that we have to have. And that's when I was saying earlier about brothers' understanding or their lack of understanding of what we are as alpha men, because now it's gotten to just trying to look good in suits and all of that. But we have to, hey man, whether it's suits and bow ties or whether it's black jeans and boots, we can do it all. And we have to do it all. We have to be committed to doing the entire thing. And the beauty of this fraternity is that you have brothers that come from various backgrounds.
Yes.
You got the brothers that I think Bozeman said the streets and the suites, or somebody said streets and the suites.
There we go.
We got the brothers that can be in the suites. We need the brothers in the streets as well.
That's definitely one of the things I love. Brother Wright has a question he's going to pose, and then following that, as we come to the end of this chat with the frat, the epidemic within the pandemic, as we move toward the close, I'm going to ask my guest speakers, what is next, the next step? So I'm going to have Brother Wright ask his question, and then I'm going to move to each of my guest speakers to briefly help us understand what is the next step in this process, and then we'll close out from there. Dr. Wright?
Greetings. I think our district director covered it well in terms of, what we as Alpha Men should do. Just bearing in mind, because Doug gave a great chronology of some of the history around this. In 1927, E. Franklin Frazier, who's also an Alpha Man, he wrote a book, a thesis called The Pathology of Race Prejudice, while he was a professor at then Atlanta University School of Social Work. He had to leave in the cover of Dark because of the findings. So we see this point that district director pointed out in terms of, we check the box, it's not over. We're dealing with a pathology that has existed from the inception of this country. 2012, and this is why this touches me so profoundly. In 2012, I took a group of young men from the Knights of Pythagoras over to the Moores Ford Bridge. I don't know if people have heard of that. That was the last unresolved lynching in the state of Georgia, in Walton County. The young men that I took over there would be the age of the brother that was shot and killed. So what has happened here is profound. And, we really have to understand that, policy drives practice. And in a race-based society, we can't have policies such as citizens arrest. That is code for lynching with people who have a pathology. So I think our district director is correct. We have to come up with new policies or help our officials under the Gold Dome understand the need for policies that are not so wide sweeping, that empower people to take action that is dangerous to us as a race of people. It's unacceptable.
Powerful. Thank you very much. So as we move towards the closing list, I'm gonna go to you first, DB. And one of the things I love to make people bring to folks' recollection, one of the powerful things among the many things that Bose talked about yesterday, he constantly said that this is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And Bose has been engaged in a marathon. You were active in Morris Brown College. DB shut down Morris Brown College. So this protest of a peace or level of activism is nothing new in this. And I've certainly had the opportunity to watch several of these brothers on here take a harsh stand with regard to those who want to ride the fence. But I want to close out by hearing from each of our guest speakers, starting with you, DB. What is our next steps?
Well, I think a couple things, Doc. Nikki Giovanni said it best: you can quit the struggle, but the struggle will never quit. I think the district director is onto something. The beautiful thing that brought me to Alpha was we are brothers with various backgrounds. We're grounded in academia, and but we represent the whole gamut of Black life. And so what do you do in times of crisis? You got to analyze it. You're a great statistician. So we got to have within this body of Alpha, those assemble the best legal minds. So when Francis Johnson is on the ground and there's a bond hearing, if we need to be advising and looking over the shoulder of the people who are going to be in there, the legal counsel who will be in there, we need to do that. I'm a street soldier. I make no apologies about it. And so when we mobilize, we should stand up hundreds of alphas across Georgia, And so within those who are lawyers, those who are advocates, those who are legislators, and then when it comes, when we make the call, we just need the brothers to show up. And so the beautiful thing about a struggle like this is organic. Something will come out tomorrow that we didn't anticipate. But we have to be nimble and we have to be ready. You know, my dad used to always say, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Mm.
So our organization as Alpha and as Black men, we got to stay ready all the time so we don't have to get ready. And I end with Baldwin, because Baldwin said, look, to be Black and in America, and to be relatively conscious is to be in a constant state of rage.
Yeah.
You know, I ain't got time to be cooled off or watered down or milk toast. Got to go to committee to make a decision. Hell, if y'all don't want to move, then I'm gonna move without you, and maybe you come on later. We've got to have that kind of storm the Bastille kind of mentality on this, because again, now every brother on this line is of an age where we could have had a 26-year-old son laying out there in that street, and he did nothing wrong, just point blank and simple.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Brother Johnson, next steps, where do we go from here? Brother Johnson, did we lose him?
No, I'm here with you, brother. Where we go from here is to continue to organize, to advocate, to litigate, and to continue to engage in direct action. You know, folks say, I'm tired of marching. What does marching ever do? Marching is an attempt to dramatize a condition, to apply pressure. And pressure not only busts pipes, it also changes coal into diamonds. And it was only the pressure of people that moved this circumstance from what it is to where it is right now, which was that there were going to be no arrests and this was going to be a cover-up. And now there's been an arrest. And now folks, Republicans, get this, who have been opposed to hate crime legislation since the Civil War, are now falling over themselves to get in front of a camera and say they support it. We have to keep the pressure up. If you want to join the Just Georgia Coalition, and I would invite Alpha Phi Alpha, my beloved fraternity, of which I'm a life member, and cut me, I'll bleed black and gold. My sons don't know it, but they bleed black and gold. I would love to see Alpha Phi Alpha be the first fraternity to sign on to the Just Georgia Coalition, where we have a multi-pronged approach that involves litigation, that involves legislation, that involves continued direct action, which is all aimed to put pressure at bringing down this system. For as pervasive as white supremacy is, and race-based pathology we talked about, it has not always been this way. These are the tools of empire. This is what empire needed to go into Africa and rob it. For the last 500 years, it is sought to do that. And it will not always be this way. And we will be the generation, I believe, that will bring it to the end. And may all our powers engage to do our master's will in that regard. So, brother, the Just Georgia Coalition can be found at online at just-georgia.org. You'll see our list of demands. You'll see our lens. You'll see the mission of that amazing coalition that has come together. And there's a part for every brother, regardless if you're in the streets or in the suites, to play a part, to apply that pressure wherever you are and whatever sphere of influence you have. Thank you for having me tonight. Very glad to be on and in this very special House of Alpha.
Powerful. Thank you very much. To our district director, Brother Sherman M. Lofton Jr. Brother Sherman, I almost prophesized on you in this great Frat, but I won't do that on this thing. So I'm just going to leave it right here. But you know where my mind is. Go ahead. Next steps. Where do we go from here?
I think Brother Bozeman and Brother Johnson have highlighted some key points. There's really not much to add to that. I think their points are right on. I think Brother Johnson made mention of like Just Georgia. I said it before, Alpha can't do this by itself. So we have to affiliate and collaborate with other organizations of like mind. When we have mutual goals, that we should be able to align ourselves and partner with them. And whether it's just Georgia, NAACP, and what have you. But next steps, I think, again, is we have to retool Alpha in a sense to be able to respond to these types of incidents when they occur. We need a response team. To when these things happen, we need a response team to really be in place, in 36 hours, to be able to show that we're there, and there with a plan.
Rapid response.
Not just there, but there with the plan, there with the strategy, and we're working off a rule book that we know that we have created, and we understand that this is how we move. That's really what our next steps are. I think we have an opportunity to really put Alpha back where it was, because every couple of years you hear these questions where, are Black Greeks relevant? Well, the question is, are they relevant? Yeah, we absolutely are relevant, but we also have to make the case a lot of times for our relevancy. And this is one of those instances of how we do that. Like Bozeman said, he's a street soldier. I'll call you a field general, sir. Field general, you're out there. But and then we've got Brother Johnson. He's got the legal aspect. But there are different other parts and pieces to this that Alpha should absolutely be playing a part. And that's really where we need to go. And in closing, just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I absolutely love the Chat with the Frat series. I usually have other meetings going on Sunday evening, so I've not been able to make them. But thank you for including me in this. And this is why the Omicron Phi Lambda chapter, this particular room in the House of Alpha, is truly special.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. These different hats, I almost said past Master Evans. Brother Evans, you're the historian. Is history repeating itself? What's the next step as a historian?
Yeah, Brother White, thank you. When President Obama was elected, you had this sentiment of people taking our jobs, which led to governors running for election with rifles on commercials. I remember reading the statistics of 2015. That year, there were 104 African Americans murdered by police. That was a staggering number that we've never seen anything like that before or since. And you can see the graph spike in 2015, because when an African American people are doing well financially, or we can just look at what was going on with COVID in the last 60 days, when there is destruction and there is desperation, the first people sacrificed are the minority people. And so when you see COVID hitting, the next thing you're going to see is rage from other cultures. And so we've got to be prepared as we go into 2021 to deal with that. We weren't prepared for COVID. I grow tomatoes and peppers, but I don't have chickens in my backyard. I don't have a cow that I'm milking in my backyard. And so if I'm not prepared for the little things, when I'm stopped by law enforcement and I don't have my insurance up to date, or when I'm stopped by two white men because I'm looking at a home and I don't have a firearms carry permit. Think about 1868 to 1870, when there were 32 African Americans elected to the Georgia House of Representatives. And they expelled them. They said, no, our state constitution don't allow for no Black man to be a state representative. And what did we do? Just like with DB and Miley Davis and others marched on yesterday, we marched to Albany, Georgia. And we said, no, y'all not going to remove our 32 elected officials. And so from Albany, Georgia, we marched to Camilla. But what did the sheriff of Camilla, Georgia do? They said, oh, we hear they coming here with guns. And so the sheriff organized the militia. And they shot at us as we marched peacefully, as we marched to Albany. And that shooting led to the laws in Georgia saying that no public gatherings, you can have weapons. And that's what led to modern day firearms license. And so for me and mine, Dr. White, we always talking, let us make man about Black men. What is a Black man? I've heard Dr. White ask that of neophytes. What is a Black man? What is a man? A man is typically three things: a healer, a builder, or a warrior. And so for me and mine, for my two young men who hopefully one day will know what it's like to be a part of this house of Alpha, for me and mine, we're going to have to know how to grow tomatoes. We're going to have to know how to get a bullet down target, because we're going to heal each other. But at the same time, we have to be warriors. And the two men that I thought were warriors, Dr. White, that led me to Alpha, the two best warriors I knew were Dr. King and Maynard Jackson. And one got you politically, the other one got you economically. And if we don't start teaching that, as well as the beans, the greens, tomatoes, as well as having a firearm and knowing how to use it, as well as knowing how to use the political machine that Brother Lofton talked about, as well as knowing how to use the economic machine that Attorney Johnson talked about, then we're going to always be missing a piece of that puzzle. So for me and mine, that starts tomorrow. When the next time Brother Bozeman calls for action, or the next time the Alphas have something nationally with go to high school, go to college, and we don't see the importance of that, or Alpha Academy, then we were going to be continuously at the end of this repeating cycle.
Thank you very much. Powerful. So as you all see, we are engaged in what is called Chat with the Frat. I'm highly appreciative of these community leaders and activists that we have on today. Certainly have set the tone and put in perspective why we call this the pandemic within the epidemic, the epidemic within the pandemic. So we are continuing our strides and continuing in our efforts to make a difference. Now, on next week, we're going to take this thing to another level in our continued effort of responding to COVID-19. And this time, we are going to address, it's called Behind the Numbers. Brother Hickson Johnson, you want to briefly talk about Behind the Numbers and what's taking place next week?
Absolutely. So every day we're getting bombarded with different numbers related to this COVID-19 pandemic. And so with that, we're getting a lot of misinformation and misinterpretation of what these numbers mean. So what Brother Banks and I are going to do, we're going to go over what all of these percentages, what numbers really matter during this pandemic, how you can help others interpret that data, and then also where are reliable sources of information. Most journalists are not statisticians, so you will see a lot of numbers out there that are absolute garbage. And what we want to do is make sure that you can sort through that garbage and see what the actual truth is, and mostly because that is going to help you all make decisions, right? The numbers will inform your ability to guide your households, to guide the people who you are responsible for. So that's what we'll be covering next week.
Thank you very much, Brother Henderson. So it is Behind the Numbers. We didn't do it this week, but to be sure to keep in mind, every week we begin our chat with the Frat in terms of the medical updates. And Brother Graham, Brother Dickerson, I apologize that it didn't get to you all on this week, but certainly on next week, we will begin that process of understanding much of what that means. Brother Henderson, I'm excited. Again, one of our NEOs stepping forward. Where you at Georgia Tech? What you getting your doctorate in?
Doctorate's in aerospace engineering. I'm a rocket scientist.
Yeah, he's a rocket scientist. So when Brother Johnson says it's not rocket science, we ought to kind of pause for a moment and just listen to what the hell he said. But certainly he's going to talk with crowds, keep his virtue, walk with kings, don't lose the common touch. So he's talking about making those numbers plain for us. And I'm excited because when you all do that, you also have the medical doctors who are going to come forward and talk. And then we also got Brother Bunn, who is a journalist. And so when we talk about putting all those pieces together, I think it's going to be an exciting discussion on last week. So once again, my name is Brother Gary White, one of the members of this interdisciplinary team. And I want to thank everyone for what they have, your contribution, and thank everyone for joining us. Of course, we will never close out this piece. We heard from my district director, who was a guest speaker, but we will close out this piece by hearing from the president of Omicron Phi Lambda, Brother Marshall J. Taggart. Brother President.
Thank you, Brother White, DB. It's good to see you, Brother Bozeman, and our district director on the call. And again, thank you for everybody who's here from a Facebook perspective. I am glad to see that we have a basic levels of brothers who are involved in all different areas, man, and that's what makes Alpha special. Definitely want to thank the committee for doing this. This is number 8. Am I correct, Brother White?
Yes.
Okay, going on to the 9th session. And in this instance, you know, we'll have definitely to break down the numbers. I'm glad to see Brother Henderson Johnson involved as a Neo, and his line brother Darren Wright, in this instance. So we're looking forward to everybody coming out. And again, let's make this happen. Let's do something to definitely make a difference. Support legislation, definitely get in the streets, and also in turn band together as brothers to make it a better place for African Americans.
Thank you very much, Brother President. So once again, on behalf of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Omicron Phi Lambda chapter, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're going to invite you to go to YouTube, South Fulton Alphas, and check out all of the series that we have conducted. Be sure to like as well as share our page. We could not have done it without you. To our guests, Brother Bozeman, Brother Johnson, Brother Lofton, Brother Evans, I thank you all very much. And I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't close this out to give another shout out to that hidden guest that popped on, Attorney Miles Davis of the Davis Bozeman Law Firm, who was also instrumental in making this possible. So we're making history. This thing is going to expand in terms of this efforts for the betterment of Black men. So once again, on behalf of the chapter, on behalf of our guests, and on behalf of our ancestors and those who have sacrificed so that we may even be able to engage in this, I thank you all. Take care. And of course, God bless. Thank you. Give them up, Ross.